Welcome to Live, life-inspired views for every day. My name is Chris Meyer, and I'm a curious soul. In the beginning of my research into resiliency, I thought that if someone was not resilient, they were probably suicidal. I remember the day when I came across a study that suggested there were other ways that people reflect a lack of resilience. The list of characteristics includes fatigue, depression, defensiveness, blaming, isolation, bullying, as well as suicidal ideation. Another trait that was a surprise to me was that often people who lack resilience becomes cynical. And over time, habitual cynicism isn't healthy and can damage relationships and even our health. But the other day, I thought of another trait, and that trait is bitterness. Do you know any bitter people? Do you struggle with that feeling within yourself? The dictionary defines bitter in 3 ways. Sharpness of taste, lack of sweetness, and which I suppose can describe certain people. Number 2, anger and disappointment at being treated unfairly. And number 3, feeling resentful, which probably conjures up many people in your mind, I'm sure. So many things can ignite feelings of bitterness in people. Sometimes it grows as layers of misfortune are piled on, one experience after the other with no seeming break. Sometimes it is something nurtured by the tapes in our mind from our early formative years. Often it is societal imprinting from hearing over and over phrases that start with, "You shouldn't have to." Like, "You shouldn't have to suffer. You shouldn't have to wait. You shouldn't have to be the one to do that. You shouldn't have to put up with that much pain." Or the shoulds. "You should have been the one to win. You should have been paid more. You should have been the one to live the life you dreamed of living." I could go on, but I think you get the idea. Do you feel the energy drained out of you when I read those phrases? Just think of how much we burden ourselves when we choose to hold on to those statements in our minds. The only one who can change the attitude of bitterness is the one embracing it. As I thought about the antidote to bitterness, I remembered the cliche, "Instead of being bitter, be better." I was asking my siblings on our weekly Zoom talk last week about how they would define bitter. My sister Frida brought up the cliche that we just mentioned, and then my brother Jim said, or bitter or better, and to the edges. That was in honor of our mother, who loves butter and always wants it all the way to the edges. My sister Deb said, maybe it's dealing with expectations or the disappointment in the expectations that were had. Oh, such wise siblings. My brother Pete, he was gone looking at the colorful leaves on the North Shore, and so he couldn't add to the conversation. But that sharing left me with a thought. Look at the changes in the word bitter when we substitute one letter. E makes bitter into better. U makes it into butter. A makes it into batter. O makes it into botter, which doesn't have a definition that I could find, so it becomes a delightful mystery. All that is to say is that one letter changes everything. And the everything it changes to are better, except letter I. I have dear people in my world who live with bitterness, who cloak themselves in the memories of unfairness. They have lived with it so long that they might not even recognize that it is the root of their unhappiness. But what if they changed one thing, like one letter? Would that start the momentum for more letting go until they were free from the harness of a life mired in resentment, disappointment, or anger at the unfairness they experienced? I have quoted Viktor Frankl before, and I will share his wisdom again. He said, everything can be taken from a person but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. What does it look like when one chooses to let go? I remember working with a little girl named Jordan when I was a school counselor. Jordan lived in a home with many family problems. One day I stopped in to see her before she went out to recess. Kneeling by her desk, I whispered, "Jordan, how are things going?" She replied, "Better." I said, "Wow, what changed?" She exclaimed, "Me." She was empowered empowered by realizing she could be the change. So if bitterness is keeping you from being your best self, from fulfilling relationships, living a happier life, choose a better word that describes who you want to be and put it on your bathroom mirror. Join me next Monday for Live, Life-Inspired Views for Every Day. I'm Chris Meyer, and I'm a curious soul.